Hello everyone, I would like to properly welcome you to the last episode of ServiceDesk Plus Masterclass 2022. I'm Steffi Benjamin here. I'm from the User Educator team, and today we're going to see how you can build a resilient IT asset management process for a hybrid workplace using ServiceDesk Plus. Ideally, IT admins are expected to take care of their assets when they are present or when they are within their reach physically. But with the hybrid work model, the IT teams have to adapt to taking care of assets, to managing them and tracking them, even if the assets are not reachable to them at that point in time. So, we in this session aim to explore that option and how you can meet and overcome the challenges using Service Desk Plus. So, in this session, the agenda is that we're going to see how you can use our unified agent for asset discovery, how you can maintain your IT assets and stay compliant to various laws, and how you can monitor your assets performance on the go. We'll then see how you can manage your IT assets from discovery to disposal step by step. And finally, we'll check out how you can use the CMDB module in Service Desk Plus to ensure that your IT assets are audit ready. Before we go into the topic, let's go over a few benefits of having a proper IT asset management solution. So, as we just saw in the poll, the benefits would obviously include number one is that you get better visibility into your IT infrastructure. You have a clear idea on who owns which asset, what is the current state of that asset, what's its storage capacity, and so on. So, this will give you better control over your IT infrastructure. And secondly, you will be able to optimize your asset usage and ensure that there is no unwanted IT spends and that all your assets are being utilized to their proper capacity so that they are neither overutilized or underutilized. And then you can help your organization stay compliant and ready for audits, and this will in turn reduce your legal and security risks. And finally, by having a proper IT asset management solution, you can support other ITIL processes like requests, service, changes, and so on. And in doing so, but you can support them by providing proper information about the assets involved. So if there is an issue, you will be able to report properly which asset has an issue, what are the impact of that asset, and so on. So let's now go into and explore about Zilker. So Zilker is a business process management company, and did they have an IT asset management solution or not? Is what our entire webinar is going to be. So this is a fictional company. We are just considering Zilker to understand how IT asset management works in real time. So Zilker is a business process management company, and they were managing their IT assets with an outdated software. So it had minimal functionalities, and they had no proper IT asset management strategy. So this became an issue when they acquired one of their competitors, and their new employees were working from new locations, which essentially brought in a hybrid work model. Now they're having trouble tracking their IT and non-IT assets. They have shortage of assets, while some of their assets are being underutilized, and furthermore they are facing compliance issues and so on. So while Zilkar had a variety of issues, they can all be broken down into four major issues. So number one is that they had limited visibility into the IT structure. They didn't know who owned which asset and what's the current state of an asset. They had their IT asset inventory was messed up and utilization was not tracked. And two, they had unwanted IT spent. Because of this, they had underutilized assets and the existing assets were mismanaged. And thirdly, because they were continuously facing compliance issues, they were in trouble for audits, which exposed them to legal and security risks. And finally, they had no proper integration with other ITIL processes. So, thus, they were not able to bring in their help desk and their asset management into one roof. So, they were managing them separately. Now, how could Zilker resolve its issues and get the benefits we were just talking about? So, a good way to do that would be to have a proper asset management strategy that would track their assets from discovery to disposal. And in doing so, you can essentially meet and overcome all the challenges that Zilker was facing. So, the asset management strategy would ideally start with request management. So when a user needs a service or an asset, they would raise a service request. And once the service request is approved, it then moves to the IT team where they raise a purchase request. And the purchase request is approved, with meaning that there are proper stakeholders to make sure that this particular IT spend is necessary. And once it's approved, we then go ahead and procure the asset. And after procurement, we deploy the asset, meaning we assign it to the user who requested the asset, and then we continue to track its usage. So, in all this, first, you're getting a proper visibility into who's owning the asset. You are able to make sure that the asset is being utilized properly, and you are ensuring that there is necessary IT spend and there is no extra spend. And once you are, as the user is using the asset, you check out the storage, you make sure that the asset has proper storage that the user would need. And finally, as the asset reaches the end of its life, you then go ahead and plan how you want to dispose the asset. So sometimes we recycle assets. Sometimes when an asset reaches the end of its life for a particular user, you might reassign it to different users. So you should be able to properly plan this disposal. And even if the asset is completely disposed of, all this information should be present in a central repository where you can fetch them at any point in time. So, enter ServiceDesk Plus. This is where ServiceDesk Plus comes into play. So, ServiceDesk Plus helps you plan your asset purchases and manage your IT assets at the same time. So, take Zilker. They were already having a very minimized functionality asset management tool while they acquired their competitors, right? So in this case, Zilker is facing a number of issues and they need a solution that would not only help them manage their existing assets but also track their upcoming spends and upcoming purchases as well. So with Service Desk Plus, you can plan and track both of this at the same time. So one is that when you purchase a new asset, you can completely track the purchase request, the purchase order, the invoices, etc. from the purchase module. Simultaneously, you can scan the existing assets using different types of scan, and once the purchased and the existing asset details are gathered, you can go ahead and build them into your asset inventory. So while you're fetching and maintaining these details, you can then go ahead and map the assets to users, and you can loan the assets if needed. You can permanently assign them to users and so on. And once you map the assets to users, you can go ahead and start monitoring their softwares. So you can check out if the users are using any prohibited software, if the software they are using is being licensed properly, because software management is an important part of asset management. And then you can go ahead and start building relationships between the assets themselves. So rather than just mapping an asset to a user, you can also map assets to one another to mark or to show how they are linked and they function together in a particular department or in the organization. And finally, throughout this step, you can support other ITIL processes by associating the relevant requests, projects, and changes. So we'll now go into the demo and we'll see how you can achieve all of these steps we just discussed about. So this is your login screen. So you can log in as the administrator and give login. So as if you are the SD admin, this is the screen you will be greeted with. So I have logged in as the administrator. Here you can go to the setup tab. So before we go in and check how you can build your asset inventory and so on, we need to set up the nitty-gritties or the basic configurations to see to manage how your assets and your purchases are being recorded in Service Desk Plus. So in the admin tab, you have a number of configurations. To set up your asset related configurations, you can go to the customization block, and here you have asset management. So in asset management, you can see various tabs present on the top. So first you can configure what the product types are. So you can see that in Zilker, they have a number of product types configured already. So product types are basically grouping of the products based on their type, which is asset, component, or consumable. So if a product is an asset, it is scannable in a network and it may or may not have an IP address. But if it's a component, it is not scannable in a network, and it does not function by itself. It depends on an asset. So for example, workstation could be an asset, while the keyboard or the mouse could be a component. And then we have consumables, which are used in bulk. For example, VGA cables or zip ties or USB cables are all called consumables. You do not track consumables individually. Instead, you assign them in bulk to a department or to a user, and then you track them. So, based on these types, you can create different types of products, and you can categorize them as IT or non IT assets. And as you can see, Zilkar has a number of products already present. Then you can go ahead and create the different products you use. So products would essentially mean the various commodities that are purchased, like laptops or printers. You can record down to their model names and so on. And once you've created products, you can also configure depreciation to say how is the value of this product being affected as it is being used. So you might have purchased a workstation for a particular amount, but as the user is using it for say number of years, how is its market value reduced? So you can configure the depreciation here, and as the time period goes by, ServiceDesk Plus will continue updating the value of that product. And then you have vendors. So vendors are basically people from whom you would purchase your products on a regular basis. You can record your vendor details, their contact details, and the currency with which you purchase from them. And in the software type, you can configure you can classify softwares based on their licensing and purchasing. So if a software is new, if it's freeware, if it's paid software, and if so, what about its compliance? You can enable compliance to calculate and inform. So I'm sorry, you can enable compliance to make sure that it has licenses allocated properly. So if a software type has compliance enabled, then every time a user installs that software, then compliance will be calculated for the software. So this will also ensure that the software is being used as stated by the developers. And then you have software categories, which is free categorization. You can categorize these softwares based on their usage here. So softwares like Chrome or Firefox would be internet softwares or browsers. So you can categorize all those categories here. And then you have license types, where you can list out the different types of licenses that are generally used. And then you have asset states, which would indicate the current state of a particular asset, either whether it's with a user or if it's just in store. So if an asset is being used, you can say it's in use or it's being repaired and so on. And finally, you have the option to import the licenses from Excel files. So these configurations are necessary for setting up the asset module. We'll also go ahead and check out the basic configurations for CMDB and purchase module as well. So in CMDB, we have two basic configurations. We have configuration item types and relationship types. So configuration item types, or CIs to be short, are basically entities or any entity in your organization that has a significant amount of impact on the business. So in an IT environment, any entity present there will be called a CI. So you can define the different types of CIs in your organization using add new CI type. You can either define a parent and a child type, or you can just create a parent type. And other than this, you can also configure different types of relationship. So a relationship indicates what is the connection between two CIs. So if you have, so what is the connection between two CIs? So if you have a laptop being used by the admin, then in which case you can say that the admin uses a laptop. But if you want to describe the relationship in a reverse manner, you would use the inverse relationship type, where you would say the laptop is being used by the admin. So you can configure different types of relationship from this page. And then you have purchase management. So in purchase management, you can set up basic purchase request related settings, if you want your users to be notified, and in what the template should be, and so on. And then you have the purchase default values, where you can set up default values like sales tax, shipping addresses, billing addresses, terms and conditions, which would be pre-populated by default for all purchase requests. And then you have cost centers. So cost centers are departments or any units in your organization that are budgeted and tracked for cost, income, and allocation. So let's take a design team. So design team would probably incur cost on a regular basis by requesting paid softwares or by requesting materials and so on. So that would be a cost center. Similarly, travel desk would be another cost center which is constantly being tracked for the amount of money they spend. So these are cost centers, and then you can define the GL codes for all the costs that are regularly made in your organization. So GL code stands for General Ledger Code. It's basically a shorthand code that is assigned to different expense types or for different financial transactions. So you can track each expense and identify them using this code. This will be especially useful when it comes to accounting. And finally, we have vendor services. So in vendor services, you basically define what are the different types of services that your vendors are offering to you. So these are the basic configurations we need to be looking at. So once you've set up all of this, we can go ahead and check out the modules and how you can bring in new or how you can make a purchase request from ServiceDesk Plus. So you can go to the purchase tab you see on my screen, and in the purchase tab you can see two panels. One is the left panel, and then we have the main area. So here all the purchase requests are tracked, while here in the main area all the purchase orders are tracked. So to understand the workflow between them, let me show you this workflow. So as you can see, a purchase order originates from a purchase request. Once you create a purchase request, you submit it for approval. And if it is approved, you can go ahead and create a purchase order from the purchase request. And then you submit the order for approval as well. And once it is approved, you can go ahead and place the order with your vendors. And once you've received all the items, you can and the invoice as well, you can make your payments and close the purchase order. So by having multiple levels of approval, you can ensure that the IT spend is being accounted for, and you can also go back and view all this information at any point in time. So let me now show you how you can create a purchase order. You can use this icon on screen and click, and you can enter the subject. So let's say I am purchasing a few routers. Let me select my vendor. You can basically enter all the details you need. Let me select the type of purchase and say this is the router I want. Now, let me also add an approver. Say I'm adding myself as the approver. So if you want to add a user as a purchase request or a purchase order approver, you need to enable the approval permissions for them. For this, you need to go to the user details page and enable them as purchase order approver. So once you've added them, you can save, and the purchase request is created. So under the approvals tab, the purchase approver can approve the purchase request and say approve, and the purchase request is approved. Now that it's approved, you can go ahead and create a purchase order for this request so that you can actually place the order. So let's create a name for it and select the shipping address and the billing address. So and let me also configure an approver, and done. So we are saving a purchase order. So as you can see, we're awaiting for approval. So we can go to the approvals tab once again and approve it from here. So we have now approved the purchase order. Once the purchase order is approved, you can go to actions menu and place the actual order. And as you receive the items, you can place the actual order using this option. And immediately a notification or an email will be sent to the vendors, and they'll start procuring the items. And as you receive the items, you can record the details here. If you only received in part, you can enter the number here, or if you received all the items, you can just enable it and say you received all the items and receive them. So you receive the items, you can go ahead and close the PO to record it. me enter it and close. So we've not closed the PO. So the items that you received will now be moved to the Assets tab, where you can go ahead and you can manage them, you can assign them to users, and so on. But before we go there, you would remember that Zilker had issued not only managing their upcoming assets, but also their existing assets. So to bring in their existing assets, Zilker has to plan around it, right? For that, we will go back into the admin tab, where I'll show you how you can scan and bring in existing assets into ServiceDesk Plus. So here we have the discovery block, where you have several asset scanning methodologies. So first we have agent configuration. So in ServiceDesk Plus, we have a built-in unified agent that you can deploy into either your Windows machines, in your Linux machines, or your Mac machines. And as the agent scans, you can fetch the information to the application. So especially when users are purchasing an asset, you can deploy the agent before you hand it over to your users, or you can ask your users to download the agent so that you can scan them in future. So you can configure your your unified agent details from this page. Now, other than this unified agent, you can also use different scans like Windows domain scan, where you can scan the Windows machines alone in a particular domain. So if you go to new domain, you can see that you can enter the domain or the workgroup name here, and you can create a domain controller. So instead of pinging each machine in the domain, you can just ping the domain controller, and through the domain controller, you can fetch the details of all the machines to Service Desk Plus. And for this, you will need to enter your Active Directory credentials. Now, Windows domain scan is limited only to Windows machines. Then you have the Credentials Library, where you can store the credentials necessary for performing different scan types, like for taking remote control, or for performing SNMP scan, and so on. So these credentials are encrypted and stored securely in Service Desk Plus. So as you initiate those scan, you will be able to select the credentials automatically and perform the scan instantly. So we'll see about that in a moment. So we then have remote control settings. So especially when it comes to remote work models or hybrid work models, you will need a way in which you can reach a server or a machine even if it is not accessible to you. So for this, we have two remote control tools. One is the Desktop Central, which operates through the unified agent. So if your users are having the unified agent installed in their systems, you will be able to take remote control through the Desktop Central instantly. Or else you can use the web remote, which is built into Service Desk Plus as well. And you will be able to take control, but the web remote is once again limited only to Windows machines. And then we have scan settings, which has where you can configure your scan related settings. So you can say if you want to disable the ping mechanism, or if you want to be able to add unknown assets into Service Desk Plus, and so on. And then we have SNMP configurations. So SNMP configuration is applicable to SNMP devices, or devices like routers, printers, and scanners, which are managed by the SNMP agent. So when you scan an SNMP device, the system OID, or the system object identifier, which is a unique identifier for that system, is fetched into Service Desk Plus. And based on this object identifier, we map it with the right device model, product type, and manufacturer. So say I have a firewall from the manufacturer 3Com. I'm sorry, there is no all right, from the manufacturer Acme Packet. So when this particular OID is scanned by Service Desk Plus, then Service Desk Plus maps it and updates the relevant manufacturer name, product type, and the model into the application. So you can create more OIDs and model ID based on system OIDs or model OIDs, and you can map them to the right model, product type, and manufacturer. Now, other than this, you can also go ahead and update the device information itself. So while device identification helps you update the model, product type, and manufacturer, in device inventory, you can map the OID to various fields of that asset. To be more explanatory, let me show you this. Okay, so let's say we have a firewall scanned into ServiceDesk Plus. We have identified what the device is, but now we would have more details in that firewall details page, like description, location, uptime, and so on. So once again, ServiceDesk Plus would update these details by mapping them against the OID. So if you have more OIDs that are not recognized, you can configure them. You can say which attribute does this OID relate to. If the firmware revision, if the OID matches the scanned OID, then the firmware revision will be updated as we specify here. And if you have any unknown system OIDs scanned, they will be listed in this tab. Okay, so this is specific to SNMP devices. And then we have network scan, which is pretty straightforward and well known. So you basically scan all the devices in a network, be it Windows, Linux, Macs, and so on. Or you can also limit the network scan to a specific IP range. And if you want to configure, if you want to scan Windows, Linux, or Mac, you can enable the agent configuration. And here is where you can see the credentials listed down. So as you can see, the credentials we stored in the credential library is shown here. So instead of entering your credentials each and every time, you can simply fetch them from the credential library and scan the devices right away. And then we have the schedule scan, whereby you can schedule the scan to happen periodically. But you cannot select which type of scan should occur periodically, as this will depend on the last successful scan. So if I have configured a scan to happen every day, then Service Desk Plus would see which was the last successful scan and would repeat it once again. And finally, we have the distributed asset scan. So in distributed asset scan, you can scan assets that are outside your network or unreachable by the central server. So instead, you would create and deploy a remote server where the assets are, and through the remote server, you would fetch the details of those assets. So to convert a server into a remote server, you will need an Asset Explorer plugin or an AI plugin to be short. So the AE plugin would convert any server or a workstation into a remote server, and it would fetch the details around it and push the details to the central server. So to show you in detail, you can see the working in this image. So there are three AE servers present remotely, and as they scan, as the central server would initiate the scan, the remote servers would fetch the details of the assets in their regions and export the zip file to the central server. And once again, to reiterate, to perform distributed asset scan, you will need the AE plugin. So these are the different types of scan. So using any one of these scans that suit your organization, you can fetch the details of the existing assets and bring them into your centralized repository, which is Service Desk Plus. And all these details will be populated under the Assets tab. So in the Assets tab, you can see various assets are present. So you can go to the summary to get an idea of what's the last scan, how did these scans go by, how many devices were detected, how many were failed to be detected, and so on. And if you go into the IT assets, you can see that all the product types that we created are listed here. And in each product type, you can see the different products that are being scanned and fetched. So let me take you to a product and show you how it works. So in Zilker, let's say they adopted the unified agent scan. So this particular laptop was scanned and fetched using the unified agent. And as you can see, the scan status is successful. And if you want to initiate a scan at any time, you can do initiate the scan right away from the page, and the Service Desk Plus is fetching the asset details, the hardware details, on what's the hardware details, the software details, and who are the system users will all be fetched into Service Desk Plus. And one of the benefits of okay, you can see that the page is reloaded, which means the scan is complete. So as you can see, there were certain details modified in the hardware, but other than that, there were no details changed. So the latest details are now fetched. Now, one of the benefits of having the unified agent is that you can also use the tools drop down to perform various actions on this asset remotely. So I can lock this particular asset from my laptop. I can also shut it down if I suspect something is happening that is suspicious, and I can put it in a hibernate mode and so on. And as I was saying, I can also take remote control of the laptop using the desktop central option here. So, and one of the major aspects of bringing the assets into Service Desk Plus is so that you can understand how they are related to one another, right? So, for this, you can go to the Relationships tab, and here you can see how this particular asset works in relation with the other assets. So, you can add a relationship instantly, and let's say I want to connect this particular asset to a document, and I say this document was created on this asset. So let's say I say host and add. So you can see that the document is the relationship is immediately reflected here. And you can also open the relationship map and save it as a business view. So we'll see about business views in a while, but in this relationship map, we display to you how a specific asset is related to other assets or other configuration items in an organization. Now, going back, other than relationships, you can also associate contracts with this asset. You can track the financials where you can see what is the cost incurred, what is the purchase cost, what's the depreciated cost, and so on. You can also associate the asset with service requests, problems, and change and track them all from here. Now, going back to the module, we have various other products reflected here as well. Just like this product we just saw, you can perform various actions on these products. You can also initiate a new scan for an entire product type. And as you initiate, let's say you want to initiate for this, then you can use the credentials. And once again, the credentials in the credentials library will be fetched here. Now, other than while these are all assets and non-IT assets, we also have software management, which is pretty vital to asset management. So, in the scanned software area, you can see all the software that was scanned in all the users in your organization. So, during the last, whether it's a network scan or unified agent scan, the software details will be fetched and reflected here. And if a particular software is from the same user, then you can reconcile them into one application. Or you can also calculate the compliance of these softwares and make sure that they are all having proper licenses attached to them, if they are under licensed, if they are over licensed, and so on. So as you can see, the under licensed softwares are flagged. So you can also go to a software details page and view its compliance details. And then we have the software summary, where you get a bird's eye view of all the softwares that are scanned and fetched. So as you can see, in one glance, you will know that there are too many over licensed softwares, and while only a fraction of it is compliant to the licensing agreements. And speaking of licensing agreements, you also have a separate page for it, where you can maintain and the we can maintain all the license agreements you have made with your vendors or your manufacturers. So a license agreement is basically a contract between a software vendor and a purchaser. So you can maintain these agreements in one database, which is ServiceDesk Plus, and you can associate these agreements with the relevant licenses as well. And you can also store your licenses in ServiceDesk Plus. You can add new licenses, whether a standard license or an upgrade license. And as you can see, we have the license, and you can select what type of license it is. You can say how is the license being managed, and who's the manufacturer, and so on. You can also record who is purchasing this license and which site it is associated to, and so on. And finally, we have service packs, where you can track the hot fixes or upgrades or patch updates that are performed in any asset. So if an asset is being upgraded by the user, then the upgrade details will be fetched and displayed in the service packs tab. We then have the asset loaning feature, where you can track the assets that you're loaning. So let's say in Zilker, a particular user needs an asset just for 3 months. So instead of purchasing a new asset and giving it to the user and then letting it just waste in a corner after 3 months, you can loan the asset to a user, track the loan period, and later on reassign the user to someone else. So this way, you will be able to ensure that your assets are not being underutilized. So in ServiceDesk Plus, you can maintain your loan registry where you can track how many assets are being loaned in bulk to a user. And all the loaned assets can also be listed separately and seen. You can filter them by product types, you can filter them by sites or products, and so on. You can also view the loanable assets as in assets that can be loaned are tracked here. And then we have the loan expired assets tab, where if a particular user fails to return the asset on time, then they'll be listed here along with the delay in their time period. So other than this, we also have asset replenishment, where you can see and maintain if a particular asset is falling below the threshold in your inventory or in your user's hands. So let's say that I have 30 Bluetooth keyboards in my in-store right now. If the threshold count falls below 10, then I would like to know so that I can replenish it before it hits count 0. So this is where asset replenishment feature comes into play. So you can create the replenishment for a particular feature, and you can say, let's say I have routers, and I okay, I have 0 routers at the moment, but let's assume I have 10 routers. And if my asset count falls below 5, then I would like a notification. So, as my router is being assigned to users, if the count in the in-store falls below 5, then a notification will be sent either to the admin or to the configure technician so that they can replenish it before the organization runs out of the particular asset. And then we have barcodes. So ideally, when we receive assets, we use the vendor's barcode to scan and manage them. In Service Displays, you can use your vendor's barcodes, or you can also create your own barcodes and assign them to users, so that later you will be able to track a particular asset using the barcode. And in Zilker's case, they can generate new barcodes for their new purchases, or also they can generate barcodes for their existing assets and track them. So let's say I want to add new assets. So let's say I am purchasing a particular router, and this is my router's prefix and suffix. So I can set what should be the barcode. I can either generate a sequential barcode, or I can enter the barcodes manually. So once I click generate, then the barcodes are generated and added to the assets tab. So I can continue to print the barcode, so I can physically paste it on the asset and track it later on, or I can skip this step. And finally, we have groups. So in groups, you basically bring in a number of assets and track them together. So here I have a group called administration. So groups can either be static or dynamic. So while creating a group, you can define how you want it to be. A static group is where you pick out assets and group them regardless of whether or not they're related. But a dynamic group is where you create a specific criteria, and if the criteria is matched, then the particular asset would automatically fall under the group. So here, administration is a dynamic group. So you can see the criteria I have specified here for the site and department, and all assets that meet this criteria are brought into the group. So this is how groups work. So using groups, I can deploy packages, I can deploy upgrades, I can take controls over them in bulk, and so on. So then we have the CMDB module. So while in assets module, we focused on scanning and fetching the asset details, in CMDB module, we focus on building relationships between the assets. Here is where we define how the assets are dependent on one another. So CMDB, for those of you who are not aware, CMDB stands for Configuration Management Database, and it's a centralized repository that stores all details about all significant entities in an IT environment. So it is designed to support an IT structure, and here you should be able to manage and track your interrelated assets. So this is not limited to only assets, because assets are not the only entities in an organization. There are people, there are departments, there are other entities present as well. So all assets and additionally other CIs such as people, department are all fetched into CMDB module as CIs. So you can see here we have data center as a CI, we have departments, we have documents, and scrolling down we have switch ports, support groups. So all of them are entities that are somehow impacting the organization. So as you build relationship between the CIs, you will be able to view them in the business view. So we just talked about business view a while ago. So let me open a business view and show it how it looks. So as you can see, this is a complex relationship map. So prior to this, a while ago, we saw relationships map, which defines relationship for one particular or one specific CI. But a business view shows you the interconnectedness between multiple CIs and for multiple levels. So you are not limited to just a specific CI, but rather you can view all related CIs, and this will help you understand how when one CI is affected, the others are also being affected. So let's say that a particular CI runs into an issue, then you can see that when this CI is affected, then a department is facing the impact of it. There is a particular user facing the impact of it. And speaking of issues and incidents, we can also associate incidents and problems to CIs. So you can see that a particular CI has something associated. So on hovering, you can view that this particular CI has a problem associated with it. And thus, you can, in one glance, you will be able to understand what's the impact of that problem. Similarly, you can also track associated requests, associated changes, and so on. So you can save the CI, you can also export it into PNG or PDF. So this is how CMDB module works. Here is where the ITIL processes come into the asset management process. So now that you've set up your entire asset management strategy, you've made sure that when a purchase is made, it is recorded in the purchase tab. And all the assets in your organization can be scanned and fetched into your assets tab. And the relationships between them are matched or mapped in the CMDB tab. The last step would be to make sure that you are able to track the assets and their performances with respect to the users, with respect to various other metrics. So for this, we have the reports tab. So in reports tab, you basically generate reports to see how your assets are performing. So let me take you to, we have a number of built-in reports. You can also create your own custom reports. You can use queries to fetch in any details and create reports based on that. So I will create you a built-in report. So let's say I want to view a report for all workstations and or servers based on their operating system. So a report is generated instantly. So while this report is relevant at this point in time, I can also add it to my dashboard and say update it. So now I can go to my dashboard and I will be able to view this report in live. So going to my dashboard, you can see that we get a bird's eye view of the entire asset desk in one flow. So I can see a summary, I can see how my workstations are performing, and scrolling down, let me go back and reassign that widget. This must be a technical issue. All right. Okay, we'll add this to the dashboard now and add. So going to my dashboard, scrolling down, I can see the widget appear here. So the reports can be added here, and every time I want to view the latest details, I can simply refresh it and get the latest information available. So this way you will be able to track your performance of your help desk, the performance of your workstations, or all your assets in one place. Now going to the slides. To have a quick recap of everything we saw today, we saw how you can discover and scan all the assets using different scan methods. We saw how you can manage your asset purchases and how you can track a purchase and record all the relevant cost information. We then saw how you can utilize the assets effectively, how you can classify them, how you can loan them, track them, how you can make sure that the replenished assets are being refilled quickly, and so on. We finally saw how you can map your workstations to users and to other CIs, and how you can get a bird's eye view of your entire IT infrastructure, thus giving you proper visibility into your organization's asset environment. We also saw how you can manage and measure your asset performances using reports and dashboards. So at this point in time, if you have any questions, feel free to add them to the Q&A panel. I'm sure our experts were answering you then and there. Before, let me also introduce you to more resources. So we have the admin guide available. We have release notes that intimate you on the latest upcoming releases. We also have several product videos in our YouTube channel, and we have the community forum where you can chat with your peers, and the support portal where you can contact a support team. And at any point in time, you can also write to hello at servicedeskplus.com to get your doubts or to share your feedback with us. Thank you all for joining in. Until next time, it's a bye bye from Steffi.